Hey, hello, and welcome to From AI Mandates to Measurable Impact with Databricks and Retool. I'm Sean Allen. I'll be your host today. I lead the product marketing team here at Retool, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Satish Gangichetti, the practice lead of AI and ML for retail, CPG, and travel at Databricks. Welcome, Satish.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Let's get started here, I suppose.
All right, perfect. So today we're going to talk about AI adoption mandates. Right, they're everywhere, but meaningful and practical direction are pretty scarce. So we're going to bridge that gap with some real talk on governance, modern building, real world use cases. So let's jump right into it, Satish. Our customers are telling us we need to ship something with AI in Q1, right? It comes out as like all pressure and no direction. What's the most ambitious AI deadline that you've seen in your customer base?
Yeah, Sean, this such a interesting, good question, right? So you see customers across this entire spectrum of people that have already played with AI and they understand the ins and outs of it. And the the high level idea here is that you now have customers who previously thought that it's going to take a month or a couple of months to get an AI project out, understand that it doesn't take that much. That is the genuine truth. But then you also have the ridiculous asks of like, hey, can you show up on the day of a particular day? Let's hash out a use case and ship that small use case to production, right? Some of these might be a realistic possibility, others are just borderline ridiculous. So you're right. Oftentimes there is all pressure but no direction. Um, but there are also cases where they understand the edges of what's possible and what can be delivered in a short span of time.
Yeah, very similar in our customer base. That gap between prototype and production can be a pretty hairy one. We recently did a survey about 1,000 builders, and some really interesting stats came back from that. We're actually going to be publishing some content around that. But one stat that I think is pretty relevant to kick us off here is that 26% of them reported that their companies had not just general AI mandates, but specific AI productivity targets. So, like, what are some of the early signals that you're listening for that show an organization is starting to move from kind of theoretical AI impact to real AI goals?
Yeah. Again, another great question. At this time in December 2025, I think pretty much every single employee at any organization is kicking their tires with some kind of AI, B2B or consumer, right? But the real signal that we look for, it typically tends to be either cultural or technical. Let me explain that. Usually large organizations, they tend to have these governance councils or governance committees that are multidisciplinary in nature. You got like people from operations, lines of business, legal, and also engineers. And also, that's the first one that we see. Like when we have customers that have established something like that, it means that they've pushed their think tokens into identifying what the use cases are, rather. And then that's the first. The second piece is you have the data readiness piece, right? So do they have intentionality around trying to make sure that they curate the data and put it in a data platform? And do they have that for not all of the data, but some of the data? Like those are some, do we see the grass showing up type of signs in an organization that are both cultural and technical nature? Oftentimes, each one of those things have their own challenges. So let me ask this question to you. What are you finding in your customer base? The challenge more cultural or technical?
I think it will surprise nobody that my answer is both. Right, like just like you see in your customer base, there's the cultural piece that we see, which is I'd say through 2025 has moved from what what should we be expecting AI to bring? What impact should we be looking for here? What are reasonable goals, targets, and expectations of the technology and my team to do this? And are we as a company ready to adopt that shift, right? Ready to embrace that change? And what I have seen on the cultural side all throughout the year is this how do I put it? This almost panicked explosion of expectation around, well, it's been fun for me over here, using one of the chat interfaces to help me with a personal problem or do some research for me or do something like that. But now we're talking about setting it loose on my enterprise stack, and that the the promise that I'm seeing, that a customer of ours that I'm seeing here, how do I bridge that gap? And that's where the technical comes. So there's already been that cultural shift, right? There's already been the stated norms of what is okay to do, and what is okay to expect. And then that's the technical side. So for our customers, and I think it's probably very similar on the Databricks side, is governance, 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 and not from the how do we restrict things, but like how do we put the right guardrails on things so that we can accelerate. And so the technical limitations have more to do with have we properly codified the enterprise rules into the different platforms that we're leveraging, and I think we've got a set of a conversation that's going to dig a little bit more into that later. But that's what we're seeing. If I can push it back your way, like this cultural shift from what can it do to, well, now I'm expected to make it do a thing, and that thing that it's expected to do is pretty broad. I've seen personal adoption for me and what it means for me in my life, but like how can organizations get people collectively moving fast without creating and exploding this ungoverned shadow IT?
Yeah, I think that's the key there. I think you even touched that in the previous comment that you made around governance. It is around like making sure that you have the guardrails around governance, right? And not just one of the things that everybody seems to be talking is that context is everything. And and for B2B apps especially, context comes from your data, from the tools that you end up using to make informed decisions. And you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing that inside of a governed, environment. And if you make this simple and easy for people to deal with, then you can actually use that to build interesting applications on that governed data, right? Now, the most important thing here, when you think about governance per se, is we're not just talking about the underlying data, but we're talking about all the other artifacts around that data. How did that data get created? Where did that data come from? This kind of allays the fears of executives where they would like, be wondering, okay, do I have to work on this particular agent to open up efficiencies in my organization? If I'm going to do that, I need to know not just the fact that the agent is using the curated data, and how did that data get there in the first place? What does a metric mean? How do we ensure that the metric means what it means, and not just some random metric that one single developer came up with on the client side, for example, right? So these are things that are real, and you want to do this on a platform that doesn't lock your data in. Well, and just for governance tooling and also for your data tooling. I think that's how you get people from trying their own little like, shadow AI apps on the side to building apps that are extremely context relevant for their business use case, but powered by their data, their tools. Of course, people like to use high quality tools, and that's how you ensure high quality. Like you cannot get high quality without ensuring both governance and quality. They both go hand in hand. And that's how you beat this whole shadow AI that you end up seeing in organizations that are usually filled with like what you call the data swarms.
Yeah, totally. Like yeah, it makes a bunch of sense, not just the governance, but also the trust. Right? How can you create in an environment where an increasing number of users who are going to be building, whether you want them to or not, can do so in a trusted way.
Yeah.
So for the data leaders that are in the audience right now, or listening on replay, like what should they be doing today in Lakehouse so it's actually ready to power an interactive app, rather than just some dashboard that's just displaying some metrics.
Yeah. I mean, our pitch is always the same, which is like, hey, there is a curation layer, there is a what we call contracts establishment layer, and there is the consumption layer, right? So within curation, you look at it, you want to basically bring all kinds of data, ingest that data into your lakehouse. And this is essentially your structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, all kinds of data cadence, be real time, near real time, batch, whatnot, and then apply the business transformations that are going to give you business context relevant data. But it's not just about the curation, it's also about setting up the contracts around that. Who's going to manage it? What's the workflow going to look like? Who's going to manage the workflows? Who's going to get called if something goes awry? What are the permission models on all these data sets, and also the objects that you end up creating as a part of curating these data sets? And how do we then, enable downstream consumption, on apps or maybe even dashboards, and how, especially in this day and age of AI, wanting to make sure that you have well-defined metrics and the semantics around the data is well understood by the agent. And this is where the whole notion of data intelligence comes into play. You are trying to make sure that you're not just curating your data in a lake house, but also embellishing it with intelligence about the data so that it understands the semantics of your data. So to power like any apps that are being built on Retool or any agents that you might end up building on the platform itself, right? So that's what we see. And so in light of that, all of this is to service an end goal, which is we see all this AI demand spike up when somebody uses an app that is, for the lack of a better word, sexy, right? And so that's where Retool is playing. So let me ask you this question. So how do you think Retool can help our customers get to market faster with these apps?
Yeah. It's a it's a question that we actually spend a lot of time talking to prospects and customers about. You've laid a fantastic foundation, right? Because if the last couple of years have taught us anything, is that AI is useless without data. Right? Maybe a caveat to that is enterprise AI is useless without enterprise well governed and understood data. Um, and I would extend that by saying and data isn't helpful without apps, right? Without a way to turn it into action. And that's where working with partners like Databricks, that um, and extending that governance layer of data that is so critical is where we play, right? And that is so what we have done is we have combined a platform that we have been developing for many years that understands enterprise rules and requirements and proper guardrailing, et cetera. Um, and and added to that a very fluid development environment that has, we call it mixed mode IDE, because traditionally where we had the ability for anybody to come in and use a visual canvas to drag and drop and create things, leverage the governed data that's contained in Databricks on the back end, et cetera, but also naturally, not as an escape hatch, but naturally extend into code so that we don't have these unnaturally low ceilings for what can be created. But throughout the prior many quarters, we have been adding generative AI to that, right? So what that does, and so how we help customers get to market faster with these apps, to answer your question, is by meeting them where they are. No matter if they are a professional developer that has all of the technical expertise and background to either be creating the trusted building blocks that everybody will use, or to create the sophisticated apps and automations that are required in a modern enterprise, or what we call business engineers, right? Which are the domain experts who are the people who are closest to the problem that needs to be solved, like data scientists or people that are on data teams or in operations teams, et cetera. Like how do they go from knowing what needs to be created to actually creating it without tossing stuff onto the backlog? So the way that we do that is by allowing for a platform for both of them to operate on, for one of them to create and codify the enterprise rules for how it is okay to access Databricks on the back end, so that domain experts or business engineers can use that on the front end. And through that same survey that I mentioned before, we've already found that our existing customer base, 48% of them are already building directly without the need for engineering, right?
Wow.
So so now that we can accelerate them, right? So now that these organizations can go fast because they have the right data governance and they have the right app and automation governance. Now that they have the tools to iterate fast, how should they be thinking about what to build?
Yeah, I mean, just to tack on to like what you had mentioned previously. Let me just say, I think it was Mukesh Ambani who mentioned something along the lines of, um, you know, content is king and distribution is God. It's somewhat similar in AI world as well. Context is king when distribution is God. Like, what are you going to do with all this data context if you can't build apps on top of it? And so when you think about like what kind of apps that we end up seeing in our customer base, it's usually anything that people are doing is usually in this, 3 by 3 that I talk about, which is in personalization, productivity, or planning. And if you can think about any use case, usually it falls into this bucket. Across the other bucket, which is uh, the horizontal bucket around augmentation or automation or transformation. Usually, as you go from augmentation to automation transformation, the rigor has to increase because the error rate has to go down. Augmentation, if you have, let's say, a copilot that gives you an incorrect answer, you're going to be like, whatever. Automation, you want it to be, taking away the menial, repetitive things away from you, not that you want to go fix it all the time. And then transformation, it's basically a lot of dollars behind that thing, and that you better get down to the T, absolutely nail it, right? So I think those are the vectors in which we kind of see like all these use cases play out. So let me then ask you, if we were to do this with Retool, like by this I mean if I were to go to Retool and open the app and start building things on Retool, what do you think is the the X factor for people to use both Retool and Databricks together?
Yeah, well, I think we've hit on some of these notes in the earlier conversation. What it boils down to for me is true utility at the enterprise level, whether it includes AI or not. It has to be grounded in the the real data, the real information, the real workflow, the real inner workings of the enterprise, right? And so, in order to do that, as mentioned before, you know, companies need an approach. They need a Databricks approach because it isn't just combining a bunch of disparate data sources and doing something with it. Some level of normalization and making sense of it all has to happen beforehand. And that doesn't just mean dumping it into one big area. I think you brought up a really key point earlier, which all of us have seen who use AI in our daily lives already, right? A lack of context gives you a really bad answer, right? So if you go into like I have been attempting to improve my prompt engineering game for a long time now, and because when I jumped into it, if I gave the prompt not very much context and just had it go off and do a thing, like the hallucinations and sometimes hysterical replies would come back. So the thing that I thought you mentioned earlier, which is super important, is that you're not just creating a unified substrate to enterprise data, you're also describing it.
Yeah.
You're also giving the context to whomever, whether it be a human or an LLM, to understand it. Because anybody that has dealt with the scatterings of enterprise data has seen, the same kind of data existing in 17 different locations. So like, how do I understand how these things fit together?
Right.
So that X factor is combining that intelligence, that understanding and that location of information, the enterprise data, with a with an app and automation, an app gen platform that can bring all of that data in and create where you can create these apps that that abide by the rules. And it's so funny because we have conversations with customers about governance and guardrails, and certainly many of the audiences that we talk to about that, you say those words and they start to kind of scratch at their skin and they're like, this is like govern. I don't. Please, can you just go away from me with that? But the reality is that the acceleration and creativity that is actually unleashed when you properly constrain or when you create the proper guardrails, like that's pretty significant. And so that's what's happening on the retool side. We've got a set of platform engineers whose job is to understand the stack and to understand the rules. So when you create one of maybe many Databricks resources inside a retool, like they are created for specific purposes. Use this one to do access to this kind of data so that I can set up the rules so that if I have a business engineer who knows what they need to build, they can just look at it, or they can prompt they can prompt retool to say go find that one, or go find the thing where this kind of data exists. And with that context and with that understanding and with those guardrails, our two layers can work really, really well together to the ultimate benefit of the customer, no matter who's building there. And I can build really simple personal apps. I can build departmental level apps. I can build cross-organizational, sophisticated automations, and I can do all of that with the proper pair of safety scissors, if you will, to know that I'm not going to slice through the data in an incorrect way because both of our platforms are doing what's necessary to move that forward.
Right. I mean, would you say that I know Reckitt is a good example of where they've done this, with Retool. Would you want to talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. I appreciate you asking that, because it's a great joint customer of ours. Reckitt is and has been a big Databricks customer for a while. They were facing, um, I was going to say self-imposed AI mandates, but it's not. It's kind of reality imposed AI mandates that are going on everybody. Like everybody knows that if they're not using it, that they're going to be falling behind competitively, right? So what they ended up doing is their approach was to focus on one particular area, and that area that they chose was marketing. So they decided, what is the best way that we can apply marketing, I'm sorry, apply AI to the varied things that we're doing in marketing, understanding that we've got an immense amount of great data about that happening in Databricks. And so they put these focus teams together. They did an alignment between the technical and the non-technical, or as I've been talking about it, right, the kind of the pragmatic engineer and the professional developer and the business engineer, like the person who understands that, pairing them together and really focusing on this. And what that ended up resulting is in specific gains across 3,000 different marketers. Like they saw up to 40% of their employee time being freed for this for higher value work. Like
Hmm.
it's funny. We get into some of these conversations around AI, and people start to talk about job implications. And the one that I mentioned when we were prepping for this that I think is an interesting analogy is I don't think that over time, the people that were using hand tools to farm really hate the fact that they can sit on a tractor now and do a number of those things, right? Like that part of our evolution took the ugly work. It took the drudgery out of it, and it increased the efficiency. And people are like, well, okay, well, if you increase the efficiency, what happens to the people that were filling those gaps before? And the answer that I say to there, and I think that what Reckitt is seeing is, that 40% of employee time that was freed up, like they're doing higher value things now. And what it does also is it opens up the imagination for what can now be done. I can't even think about getting to that. Goes to, oh, actually, I now have time. I can go do that, and I have the tools to go do that. So they saw across media, insights, innovation, content, and reporting, they saw 60% efficiency gains, and I
Wow.
do believe that Reckitt took the right approach. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think these things, when these things play out, you hit what, I'm sure people have heard about this many, many times over. It's called the Jevons paradox. When you deliver efficiencies of gains of any sort, the demand just goes off the charts. And now you start chasing after the things that you thought previously were hard to get to, and now you're getting to it. But you mentioned things about like, giving safe hands to AI. I think at Databricks, we've been spending at least the last 3 years building tooling around this. And it's also interesting to know that that's something that you are interested in. Um, so tell me a little bit more about like, how these things work in Retool, or I can actually maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll talk about like how we prepare our customers for this. And
Yeah,
I
it'd be
know that
awesome.
there are integrations that we work with you guys on, and where the customers stand to benefit out of this because of this mutual sort of like innovation trajectories that we've taken. And over the last year and a half or so, things have really just gotten out of hand in terms of the terminology. Somebody's starting today, they need to understand what these models can do, the tooling around these models, if it's tool calls, and then putting the tool calls together. Now we have MCP servers, managing those MCP servers, the connections to those MCP servers, extended external APIs and whatnot. So it's not just about putting together this agent, and it's about ensuring that this agent can do things the way that you want it to do, the way, if you were to, let's say, uh, you know, centralize all of your tooling in a single spot, in this case, Unity Catalog, it ensures that not only are you able to track human beings that are basically accessing quote unquote this agent via retool, you can also do the same thing with, other workflows that might trigger this tool. You might have, sequential agents in workflows that are meant to take away the drudgery, as you would call it, and ensure that, we are able to give safe hands while the execution is happening. And not just that, even after offline, you're able to get a snapshot of this performance of whatever it is that you're trying to, automate or augment. You capture the traces of that directly in Databricks. And then you can do this offline evaluations for your specific use case. Normally, if you're doing things like, let's say in marketing, you're trying to generate content. And then this content maybe for customer feedback or customer place an order with your digital asset and whatnot. Now, instead of trying to give them, um, vanilla responses for like, hey, thank you for your order. This is your order ID. We are now starting to see our customers generate personalized emails for them in the sense that, hey, Sean, you probably bought this, dog food for your dog. Let's just give him some name, Rufus. We understand Rufus is 3.5 years old. And, you get a little bit more personal with the customer in accordance to your brand values and whatnot. So the thing there is that's just the business use case, but then you're also wondering as an executive, okay, am I doing this right? Which requires me to trace all of these, what you call LLM calls, the model calls. That could be happening. This could be happening with your marketing team generating all this. either as workflows or as apps on Retool. But you just need to go back and assess, in a methodical way to say, okay, am I delivering the content that my user respects or rather they want? And is it in alignment with my brand voice? So those are the things that I think that we have, specialized on in being able to turn to the back end and say, okay, you can have your cool, sexy apps on Retool that can, build like it can give you the win from the front end side. But then you turn around, you're asking yourself this question of the ROI on, okay, so we delivered X many emails, this way with this app gen generated app that a data scientist was able to put together, give them the wings to fly, if you will. But then they can also go back and say, oh, by this process, I'm now able to assess there's a lift of, I don't know, like open rate for the emails that we generated has increased because we are now able to trace everything. All the traces are written off to Unity Catalog managed tables. We can go back and see how well we performed in that particular campaign, as an example, right? So I just wanted to highlight that, hey, giving safe hands does not only mean, accessing the data, but there's also this notion of ROI after the data has been accessed. And also, there's an evolutionary nature to these things. Of course, people are not going to stop with, oh, I built an app right now with Retool. Um, guess what's going to happen when it becomes successful? You're going to be asked to build five other things on that same app. And because of that, you now have to figure out, the kind of consumptions that are, consumption patterns that users are showcasing, which would require you to go back to your, the agent, if you will, or the data consumption patterns and figure out what it is that customers, in your case, that are building on Retool are really lapping up and then doubling down there. So this also, I just want to highlight, like when we talk about safe hands, there are all these other ancillary benefits that our, customers would benefit from just by going down this pathway of investing on, Retool and Databricks together.
Yeah, makes complete sense. You know, um, the safety angle becomes increasingly important as the things that you're building go from personal to departmental to organizational to company-wide. It's also incredibly important as you are going f from the relative safety of determinism into, non-deterministic approaches. And when you're using agents to automate reason to a degree, right? And so having the right safety scissors through data governance and automation governance, the right combination of deterministic tool calls done by a non-deterministic agent that are leveraging the guardrails from both Retool and Databricks. That's when you start to really build towards something that's beyond sexy, and it turns into like fascinating. Um, the 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 ideas that you can now embrace, and it ties us all the way back to the, going from all pressure and no direction to what what are we trying to do with these AI mandates? What does it mean as as an executive leader of an organization? It's kind of like go do the AI things. Like what does that actually turn into and mean? And I don't mean to be pejorative with that because the what we're starting to see is everybody in the organization turning their minds from the early bright lights into what they could actually do. Like when we launched agents earlier in this year, some of the creativity that we've seen coming out of customers has been fascinating. I'm sure
Yeah.
similar on your side. So I know that we're coming close on some time. So I'm about to hit you with a couple of questions, but
Yeah.
for the audience, we're going to go into some Q&A here real quick, and would love to field any of your direct questions. So please to add them into the Q&A panel. But maybe a couple of quick hits, Satish, as we move over into that. um, like for the data leaders that are that are watching, who have these ship with AI mandates, what's one practical thing they can do right now? Like it's the what are you going to do different on Monday to get started using our combined stack?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway that I would have, like if I were a data leader listening into our conversation, is that they would want to de-risk innovation. You want to move fast as they possibly want to. At the same time, you also want to ensure that you're de-risking innovation, both with the data, with the tool calls, with the models. You need to know exactly, like if tomorrow, even the simple things like state of the art for the model changes, you need to be in the driver's seat to be able to control what model you use, right? Things like that are extremely important. And then, how do you make sense of, this piles of unstructured data that you have in your organization? We've always built apps on structured data, but doing this in a methodical manner on unstructured data and applying guardrails on that, I think that's the whole strategy around applying the method to the madness on the data part with what you can build with Retool, how Retool works with Databricks. I think that's the one thing that I would like to, press the audience on to get themselves educated on where these integration points lie and why you should, check it out. Because I do think that for us to hit that, the whole uh, exponential overbuilding, moving from augmentation to automation to transformation, understanding these basic primitives are super important.
Yep. Yeah. Totally agree. Actually, I had one more quick one for you, but I'm gonna switch to some audience ones real quick. If you don't mind, call a bit of an audible there. One is, um, so I mentioned Reckitt as an example. Do you have any top of mind some examples along with what we've been talking about here? Because we've been hovering at the theoretical to practical level, but like any examples come to mind that you've been associated with?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. One of the things that has really excited me in the recent past, I mean, in the last 1 month, is watching non-technical audience build out entire applications that are based on grounded in their enterprise data, right? Previously, because I know hubris is a human thing, I used to look at the people that are maybe not as technical as I am and be like, oh, they would need somebody else to help them out with this use case. And customers have really surprised me in being able to build something if you pair them with the right kind of tools. By this I mean vibe coding tools that can reach out to governed tooling. By this I mean things like Retool. I cannot name this retailer. We did a hackathon with them, and we thought at the time, if we get one app at the end, we'd call it a win. And to our surprise, this was like a day-long hackathon. To our surprise, each one of those teams not just built an app, and they were able to deliver that in a governed enterprise-ready fashion. Of course, it's not like ready for production, but the fact that creativity and expression of creativity has gone off the charts because of tools like Retool, where you've demonetized like the cost of I should say, the traditional engineer, is extremely liberating for the average business person who wants to go quickly build apps without being constrained by, oh, I don't know this language or that language, or the technical know-how behind the scene.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, so what are you seeing particular organizational changes, like platform teams, product ownership, AI councils? Like, so what changes matter most for moving from mandate to execution? I'll give a quick answer on our side. This is an audience question.
Mhm.
Um, I what we're seeing is a little bit of what Reckitt did, which is the focus and pairing the technical and the non-technical to focus on what are the things like so the non-technical, the domain experts, the business engineers, what are the things that we need to be building? I'm in marketing. What do I need? I need a campaign dashboard. I need better insights on what's going on with paid. I need right. So there's a bunch of different things that go on there. And so the organizational changes have to do with putting people in the right orbits, and pulling them together where it is, where even if it isn't full organizational change, it is team composition for going and getting that done. What have you seen, Satish?
I think, in my case, what leads to execution is the combination of the technical know-how. By technical know-how, I'm not talking about the ability to write code, but the fact that there is some data that exists in the organization. Where does that exist? And the more specifically the business know-how. So pairing that is the single most important thing. And it's interesting that Retool has this term business engineers, and I completely 100% agree with that, which is if you know where your data is and if you're able to curate that data properly, and if you're able to understand the business angle of that data, then you stand to win. And so those are the teams that I typically see hit not just the markers of like delivery, if you will, on being able to deliver an AI app as a win that's relevant to the business, but also continually keep improving on it over time, right? Because it's not, again, this is all not just, okay, I built a chat app and off I go. No, but it's like continual delivery of like incremental value that you can measure over time. And that requires steep understanding of context that may not be always present in the current data sources that you have access to. So you have to like condition whatever it is that you're building under that frame. And so the AI councils typically tend to be the filters, if you will. Like they are like the ones you cannot do this thing, but you can do this other thing.
Yeah.
But then it's the I should say the practice owner or the platform owner, they are the ones that seem to have the deepest knowledge on like that business problem. And so giving them the wing, like I keep saying, giving them the wings to fly is basically like pairing them with this AI coding tools is going to get them to get to the prototype very fast to go convince the technical people, if you will, the pragmatic engineer, as they called it,
Mhm.
that person to go bat with them. Sometimes it shows up as organizational changes where there are product teams that are building specific things. Other times it doesn't have to be that. We now live in a world where, these agents can blur the line between organizations so long as you have the right kind of tools that you give access to these agents. And so that's one of the benefits of like operating today in 2025. You don't have to worry about, oh, Sean in marketing always does this one way, So yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, maybe one and a half more questions. Just looking at the clock here. So what are you seeing in regards to AI tool adoption by tenure, right? For example, what are you seeing junior engineers versus senior engineers? The tooling requires good data and execution, but how are you tuning for that audience? Take a swing. I've got some thoughts on this as well.
Uh, so my thoughts is that, the more digitally native you are, the more open you are to like any kind of uh, disruption. And so this has got nothing to do with like the tenure of an employee in an organization. It's got everything to do with like up the patterns that we learn as human beings as we grow through life. And we get like usually, I shouldn't say obsessed, but more like acclimated to a certain way of doing things. This is just generally the patterns that we end up learning. We are a, creature of routine. And so I tend to see like with a lot of the younger folk, they end up switching between tooling very, very fast. They're also very AI native in nature. But with the more tenured professionals, they're always like they have this like lens of, oh, I need to evaluate the responses out. I can't just like trust this thing. There needs to be some metric that I'm going to pass this through. There's some lens through which this just goes back to the whole notion of like white coding, right? So it is not like, you just let it drip and suddenly magically you have everything that's perfect. There are going to be areas where you might have to, redirect it, reorient it. So in at least in Databricks, what we tend to see is that adoption is usually much faster with the younger professionals, but adoption is more stickier with the uh, with the mid-senior professionals. Once they stick onto something, once they allow something, they allow for that particular tool is longer. Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo that, and simply say that I agree that it's not as tenure based as it is um, mentality based. That's what we call the pro devs using Retool, the pragmatic engineers versus the dogmatic ones, because they care about outcomes
Mhm.
and not and don't get overly rotating on the tooling to get it done. And so they seem to be more open-minded to this, and we see them embracing it more and more. So I will I'll close with one last question, which is a super quick one for me, which is having used both Retool and some rapid prototyping tools, they'd love to see something similar in Retool, the ability for non-technical users to quickly create Retool apps while still benefiting from Retool's power and flexibility would be incredibly compelling and a major differentiator for me. Sorry, it's very self-serving for me to read this one at the end because I would invite everybody to jump back into Retool right now because you will find that capability exists. We have woven generative AI across the fabric of our solution, so you can go from prompt to app. You can use generative AI inside of workflows. So if you wanted to combine deterministic and non-deterministic things inside of an automation, I gather a bunch of things and send it in and have an AI block take a swing at synthesizing or things like that. So I'd invite everybody to do that on top of their Databricks data. So, Satish, thank you so much for the conversation today. Everybody, thank you so much for your time, energy, and attention through this, and we look forward to working with you. As everybody goes forward into this, I've often described it as the most fascinating time to be alive of my entire technology career. So, everybody have a wonderful rest of your days, weeks, holiday season, and we'll see you out there. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you all. Take care.